He smirked and said, "You'll never manage without me." Now he pays hundreds just to see our kids call me mom, with pride in their eyes. That day, I realized I didn't need revenge. Just success. Before we begin, let us know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who walked away, only to watch you rise without them? And also, tell us where in the world you're watching this from. When Adam and I first got married, we were full of hope. We were young, broke and reckless, but we were also in love, or so I thought. He had the charm of a man who could sell you sand in a desert. I believed in him. I believed in us. I was working double shifts at a daycare while finishing my degree in child development, and he was bouncing between freelance gigs and big plans that never quite made it off the ground. Still, I supported him, emotionally and financially. Every time he failed, I picked up the pieces. Every time he lied, I told myself he was just under pressure. I thought loyalty meant staying through the storm. But sometimes, the storm is the person you're trying to hold on to. We had twins 2 years into the marriage. I named them Caleb and Mia. The day they were born, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt the need to hold on to someone who couldn't even show up for their own children. Adam arrived at the hospital 5 hours after my emergency C-section, reeking of alcohol, holding a crumpled bouquet he probably grabbed from a gas station. He looked down at the babies like they were some stranger's kids, gave me a half-hearted smile, and mumbled, "They don't really look like me." That sentence stuck with me for years. He would joke about it later. How I was always too sensitive, too emotional. But in that moment, I knew. I was alone in this, even if his name was still on the marriage certificate. Over the next 3 years I did everything. Diaper changes, midnight feedings, trips to urgent care, school interviews, teaching them to say, please and thank you, managing meltdowns and making up lullabies. And where was Adam? Either locked in his office, working on the next big business idea, or out, networking at bars. He would come home late, crash on the couch, and sleep through the mornings. If he did interact with the kids, it was brief and performative, just enough to take a picture for Instagram with the caption, #DadLife. People would comment how cute our family was. How lucky I was. If only they knew. The final straw came when Caleb fell off the playground monkey bars and broke his arm. I rushed him to the ER, holding him close while he screamed in pain. I called Adam 6 times. No answer. When he finally called back hours later, his voice was groggy. He had been napping, recovering from a hangover. He didn't even ask how Caleb was doing. He only wanted to know if the hospital needed his insurance card. That night, I looked at my children while they slept and realized I was done. Not angry. Not emotional. Just done. I didn't tell Adam immediately. I knew better than to ignite his temper. I started planning quietly. I gathered documents, opened a new bank account, and reached out to a family law attorney recommended by a friend. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. When I finally served Adam the divorce papers, he laughed. Actually laughed. You think you can do this alone? He said, with that smirk I once found charming and now found venomous. Good luck raising them by yourself. You'll come crawling back. Then he tried to negotiate. Tried to get shared custody to avoid child support. Tried to gaslight me into thinking I was breaking the family. But I didn't waver. I had already done the hardest part, raising them mostly alone while still pretending I had a partner. The divorce dragged on for 6 months. He fought dirty. He tried to paint me as emotionally unstable, bringing up old therapy sessions I confided in him about. He even tried to argue I was too broke to raise the kids alone, forgetting conveniently that I was the only one earning anything. But the judge saw through him. I kept every receipt, every photo, every ignored message and missed school event. In the end, I was granted full custody. He got visitation every other weekend, though he rarely used it. The first 6 months post-divorce were the hardest of my life. Emotionally, financially, mentally. I was exhausted, but also free. I took on extra shifts. I moved us into a smaller apartment. I clipped coupons and said no to anything we didn't absolutely need. But I made sure the kids never felt the strain. I still baked cupcakes for birthdays. Still played pretend pirate ship in the living room. Still showed up at every school event, cheering the loudest. The kids started calling me Supermom, after one of Mia's classmates said I looked like a superhero. It stuck. And in those moments, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I started feeling proud. Then something strange happened. Adam started showing up to the kids' school unannounced. Not out of love but out of ego. He wanted to be seen as the dad. He brought expensive toys, bragged about a startup he was launching, and told the principal he'd love to sponsor the next school event. He even tried to introduce his new girlfriend as their second mom. The kids didn't fall for it. Caleb would hide behind me. Mia would roll her eyes. They saw the difference. They felt it. They knew who was there every day. One evening, after a particularly awkward parent-teacher night where Adam tried to hijack the conversation and failed miserably, I got a message request on social media. From Adam's new girlfriend. It read, "I had no idea what kind of man he really was. I'm so sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't need an apology. I had already healed. Still, Adam kept trying to insert himself into the narrative. He started posting more pictures with the kids, pictures taken months ago, acting like he was co-parenting. I ignored it. The kids ignored it. But the people who followed him, his friends, his followers, even some of our mutual acquaintances, started reaching out to me. "You're amazing," they'd say. "I had no idea you were doing all of it alone." I didn't respond to most of them. I wasn't doing it for applause. But one day, I shared a small video of Caleb and Mia surprising me with breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. No makeup. No filters. Just genuine love. It went viral. People saw the joy in their eyes. The bond between us. The comments were filled with support. Single mom goals. She raised them right. This is what real parenting looks like. One person even tagged Adam, asking, "Where were you when she was raising them?" That's when he reached out. For the first time in over a year. He didn't ask about the kids. He didn't ask if we needed help. He asked if I'd be open to a co-branded parenting blog. Said we could monetize the story. That was the day I truly laughed. I didn't respond. But I did save the message. Just in case he ever forgot how low he'd stooped. And the best part? Every now and then, I'd see him watching our videos. Our moments. Liking the posts quietly. Sometimes even leaving comments under a fake account. Watching from a distance, realizing that the best part of his life wasn't his to share anymore. He laughed when I said I'd raise the kids alone. Now he watches from behind a screen while they shout, "Mom!" and run into my arms. Life didn't magically become easy after the divorce, but something inside me settled. I was no longer constantly walking on eggshells, no longer pretending that my marriage was something it wasn't. The kids and I began to find a rhythm. I started a small parenting blog, nothing fancy, just stories from our life, bits of advice, and the occasional funny mishap from our day-to-day chaos. I didn't expect it to grow. But people connected with it. They saw authenticity in the struggle. They saw love in the mundane details. And slowly, unexpectedly, my little blog started picking up traction. I remember the day I got my first brand email. A small children's clothing company offered me a few $100s to feature their handmade outfits in a blog post. I almost cried. Not because of the money, though every dollar mattered, but because someone out there saw value in what I was building. I used that money to buy Caleb new sneakers and Mia her favorite art supplies. That post led to another. Then a sponsored video. Then a collaboration with a toy company. I stayed honest. I never turned my kids into props. If they didn't want to be in a video, I didn't push them. But more often than not, they were eager to help. They loved being part of something that felt like ours. Meanwhile, Adam's life was spiraling in the opposite direction. His startup failed within 6 months. His relationship ended shortly after. I found out through mutual friends that he'd moved back in with his parents. He stopped showing up for visitations altogether. At first, Caleb and Mia asked about him. "Why doesn't Daddy come anymore?" I never lied. I just said, "Daddy is figuring some things out, but we're okay. We have each other." And with time the questions stopped. The absence no longer stung. It became normal. They still loved him, in a distant, idealized way. But the bond? That belonged to me. Things really changed when a parenting influencer reposted one of my blog entries. A raw, emotional piece about juggling work, kids, and the guilt of never doing enough. Overnight, my follower count exploded. I got flooded with messages from moms, dads, even grandparents who said they felt seen. I was invited to speak on a local radio show, then a podcast. Before long, I was able to quit my daycare job and focus full-time on content creation. I turned my blog into a website, launched a small online course for new single moms, started earning more than I ever had in my life. All from simply sharing the truth. With every milestone, I made sure the kids were at the center. Not just in content but in life. I started a college fund for each of them. Took them on our first vacation. Just a weekend at a cabin by the lake, but it felt like the world. We roasted marshmallows, told ghost stories, and I watched them fall asleep with the kind of peace I hadn't seen in years. That trip became a tradition. Every year just the three of us. No phones. No work. Just laughter and love. But as we rose, Adam reappeared. It started subtly. He'd like a post. Leave a cryptic comment. Message me asking to talk. I ignored him. Not out of spite, but out of self-protection. Then one day, he filed a motion in court. He wanted joint custody. After 3 years of complete absence, not a card, not a visit, not even a single birthday call. He wanted to be back in their lives. I was furious. And terrified. Not because I thought he'd win, but because I knew the stress would hurt the kids. We were finally stable. Happy. How dare he try to uproot that? The court required mediation. I showed up with a thick folder of records. Missed visits, unanswered messages, financial neglect, therapist letters, teacher notes. Adam showed up with a new suit and a smirk. He told the mediator he was a changed man. That he had regrets. That he just wanted a chance to rebuild the bond. He even said he'd been watching us online and felt inspired by what I'd done. As if his digital voyeurism counted as parenting. I kept calm. Explained that the children barely remembered him. That forcing a connection now could do more harm than good. The mediator agreed to recommend slow, supervised visitation, only if the kids were open to it. When we asked Caleb and Mia, their answer was simple. Why? They didn't cry. They didn't rage. They just didn't care. That indifference, honestly, was more heartbreaking than any anger could have been. Still, I followed protocol. I didn't want them growing up thinking I kept their father away. Adam got one supervised meeting. It lasted 20 minutes. Mia refused to speak. Caleb answered every question with one word. At the end, they asked to go home. Adam didn't request another visit. Months passed. I kept building. The blog evolved into a video channel. My first long-form video, titled Raising Kids Alone When You're Terrified You're Not Enough, got over 2 million views. Brands began to approach me, asking for partnerships. A book agent reached out, saying my story had potential. I didn't know what to say. Me. A book. But the idea wouldn't leave me. I started writing in the evenings, once the kids were asleep. Telling everything. Not just about Adam but about rediscovering strength. About motherhood. About identity. About doing it scared and still showing up. That book eventually got published. A small publisher but one that believed in the message. It became a quiet bestseller in the parenting category. I started getting invited to speak at events, workshops, women's conferences. Every time I stood on stage, I remembered that broken girl in the ER, holding Caleb's tiny hand while dialing a man who never picked up. I remembered the tears I cried alone in the bathroom so my children wouldn't see. And now I stood tall. Not just as a survivor, but as a success story. Adam saw all of it. I knew he did. Sometimes I'd catch his anonymous account watching our Instagram lives. Sometimes he'd send me voice notes, half drunk, trying to reminisce. One message simply said, "You really did it. I thought you'd fall apart." I never responded. What was there to say? The most surreal moment came during a live TV interview. I had just wrapped up a segment on single-parent resilience when the host, clearly moved, asked, "What would you say to the person who doubted you most?" I smiled, looked into the camera, and said, "Thank you for making me prove you wrong." When I got home that evening, the kids had made a sign out of cardboard, "We're proud of you, Supermom." I hugged them and cried. Not because I was sad, but because the love I gave had come back to me tenfold. Adam still tries to connect, once in a while. But now he pays to do so, through online memberships, video streams, and books with my name on the cover. He watches from a distance, as strangers cheer for the woman he once called too weak to survive without him. He laughed when I said I'd raise the kids alone. Then came the email that pulled me back into the storm I thought I'd left behind. It was from a producer at a nationally syndicated talk show. She'd read my book, loved the message, and wanted me to come on for a Mother's Day special about resilience and unconventional journeys. I was honored, and nervous. But I said yes. It felt like the next step in my journey. I spent the next week preparing for the segment, picking the right words, reviewing notes, trying to condense 1,000 moments of pain and perseverance into a few minutes of television. The day of the taping, I wore a powder blue blouse that Mia had picked out and a pair of heels that Caleb said made me look like someone important. The studio was bigger than I imagined, buzzing with cameras and stylists and frantic producers holding clipboards. I felt out of place. But when the host took my hand and guided me onto the set, I took a breath and remembered who I was. I wasn't the woman who once cried in the pantry while her baby screamed from a high chair. I was the woman who turned that moment into a lesson for thousands. The interview started beautifully. The host asked about the early years, about choosing to raise the kids alone, about the fear and the determination. I told the story honestly. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't paint myself as a martyr. I just spoke about love. Real love, the kind that sacrifices sleep, gives up career dreams, and still finds joy in finger paint chaos and bedtime songs. The audience nodded. Some wiped tears. I was in the middle of describing the night I signed my first book deal when the host said something that made my stomach twist. "We reached out to someone from your past," she said gently, "and he agreed to join us via video call to share how your journey has impacted him." I froze. And then there he was. Adam. Live on a screen behind me. He looked older. Thinner. Like life had weathered him in the ways it never quite touched me. His expression was a mix of awkward regret and uncomfortable pride. I could hear the studio gasp. I saw the host shift in her seat, sensing the tension. And in that moment, 1,000 thoughts screamed in my head. What was he doing here? Did the kids know? Did I have to respond? Adam cleared his throat and spoke. I know I wasn't the father or partner I should have been. And seeing how you have raised the kids built this life, I realize now what I threw away. You did everything I didn't believe you could, and I'm sorry. He tried to hold my gaze through the screen. I watch the videos sometimes. I saw the kids singing on your birthday, the one where Mia made that cake from scratch. I've never felt so far away from something I once took for granted. I could feel every eye in the room locked on me, waiting, hoping for grace, or anger, or something that made good television. But I stayed still. Not because I was cold, but because this wasn't his moment. It was mine. And I wasn't going to let him hijack the narrative with a last-minute redemption arc he hadn't earned. So I smiled, gently, and said, I appreciate the apology. But everything I've built, everything the kids and I share, it came from showing up, day after day, when it was hard and lonely and messy. They grew up with love because I was there. Not watching from a screen. Not remembering from a distance. I was there. The host tried to pivot, clearly shaken by the unexpected heaviness. That was powerful, she said. Do you ever see a future where co-parenting is possible? I shook my head. You can't co-parent with a ghost. The room went silent. Adam blinked, opened his mouth, then closed it. He nodded slowly, like he finally understood that this wasn't his story to reclaim. The segment ended soon after, and I left the studio shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of reclaiming a decade of pain in 5 honest sentences. On the ride home, my phone buzzed with messages. Friends, viewers, editors, even strangers. All thanking me for showing what real strength looked like. For not letting a man rewrite the ending just because he showed up too late. But the most important message was waiting at home, in the form of 2 little faces watching the segment from our couch. Caleb looked at me as I walked in and said, You were honest, even when it was hard. I'm proud of you. Mia added, He got to say sorry. But we got to keep you. That night, we ate pizza on the floor and watched our old home videos. Ones from the first year after Adam left. The shaky footage of Caleb learning to ride a bike while I ran beside him barefoot. The blurry clip of Mia singing "Let It Go" into a hairbrush with whipped cream on her nose. All those ordinary moments that became extraordinary simply because we shared them together. I tucked them in later and stood by their door for a while, just listening to them breathe. That was the sound of everything I fought for. I don't know if Adam truly understood the gravity of what he lost. Maybe he did. Maybe he still watches every video. Maybe he'll read this chapter one day, like the rest of the world, and realize that apologies don't undo absence. Regret doesn't rewrite years. And sometimes, the strongest thing a woman can do is carry on. Quietly, fiercely, and without needing closure from the man who left. Because in the end, I didn't raise these children to need a father who gave up on them. I raised them to know a mother who never did. The days following the interview felt like stepping into a brighter version of my life. My inbox overflowed with invitations, offers, and heartfelt letters from single mothers who'd seen the segment and felt seen for the first time. One woman wrote, "I cried the moment you said, you can't co-parent with a ghost. Because that's exactly what I've been trying to do for years." Another said, "You reminded me that I'm not failing just because I'm alone." Those messages meant more than any book review or check ever could. They were proof that my story, our story, had become something bigger than just survival. It had become a mirror for women walking the same lonely road I had once walked barefoot. But even as the outside world celebrated me, I couldn't shake the storm that Adam's sudden reappearance had stirred inside. For days, I found myself playing his apology on repeat in my mind. Not because I needed closure, I had already built that myself, but because I was angry. Angry that after all these years, after every skipped birthday and missed milestone, he still thought he could show up on national TV and fold himself into our narrative like some forgotten puzzle piece. And part of me feared he might try to come back. Not for me, but for the kids. He had seen them now. He had heard their laughter and witnessed their growth. What if curiosity slowly transformed into guilt, and guilt into entitlement? My answer came one Sunday afternoon, less than 2 weeks after the interview aired. I was in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches when the doorbell rang. I peeked out the window and froze. Adam stood on the front step, holding a gift bag and a look of practiced humility. The kids were upstairs, so I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. For a moment, we just stood there. He cleared his throat and gestured to the bag. "It's for Mia," he said. "I saw her drawings in your book. She's amazing." I didn't take the bag. Instead, I crossed my arms and waited. He shifted uncomfortably under my stare. I wanted to say what I couldn't say on air. "I know I messed up. I've missed so much. But I'd like to try. Maybe be part of their lives now if they'll let me." His words were soft, but they hit me like a drum. Not because I believed them, but because I had waited years for him to say something. Anything that sounded like responsibility. And now that it had finally come, I realized how little it mattered. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You don't get to drop in now that the hard part's over. You don't get to claim them just because they've turned into people you're proud of." He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. "Let me finish. You weren't there for the fevers, the school projects, the nights I had to choose between groceries and the electric bill. You weren't there when Caleb asked why his dad didn't want him, or when Mia cried because she forgot what your voice sounded like. I handled all of it, without resentment, without bitterness, because I had to. And I will not let you rewrite that." He looked down, ashamed, but I wasn't done. "They're not prizes you get to claim now. They're people. And right now they don't even know you." I softened slightly. "I'm not saying you can never try. But if you want to be in their lives, it won't be on your terms. It will be slow, respectful, and entirely dependent on what they want. And you don't get to be angry if they choose silence." He finally nodded, the weight of his choices visibly settling on his shoulders. He placed the gift bag on the porch and walked away without another word. I stood there until he disappeared around the corner, then went back inside. I didn't tell the kids that he came. Not yet. I needed to protect that fragile bubble of stability we'd built. The one where they laughed without fear of disappointment, where love didn't come with question marks. That evening, I sat in my room reading Caleb's latest poem. It was short but poignant, just 5 lines about shadows, distance, and the way some people disappear before the sun even sets. I wondered if somehow, he had felt the tremor Adam's visit had sent through the air. Mia came in a little later, holding a picture she'd drawn, a lighthouse surrounded by dark waves. "It's us," she said. "You're the light." I hugged her tighter than usual that night, not because I feared losing her, but because I was overwhelmed by how far we had come. These children had not only survived abandonment, they had flourished in the light I worked so hard to keep burning. Over the next few days, I took time to reflect. I didn't write. I didn't do interviews. I just lived. I sat with Caleb while he built a birdhouse, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. I danced with Mia in the kitchen to 90s pop music. I walked alone through the park and watched families from a distance. And slowly, I felt the tension unravel. Adam might always linger on the edges of our story, but he no longer had the power to derail it. My children weren't broken. I wasn't broken. We were a mosaic, stitched together by resilience, polished by love, and beautiful precisely because of the cracks. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of it all alone. I felt free. The weeks after Adam's visit felt like the first deep exhale after years of holding my breath. It wasn't that life suddenly became easy. There were still deadlines, school projects, grocery lists, and occasional moments of loneliness, but something had shifted. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to tap me on the shoulder and demand my attention. I was no longer haunted by what Adam might say or do, or whether he would try to insert himself into a family that had already learned how to thrive without him. I had drawn a boundary, and more importantly, I had stood firm in it. That realization, more than anything, became a turning point in how I saw myself. Not just as a mother, but as a woman who had survived something quietly devastating and emerged stronger for it. Caleb had started opening up more. He wasn't the most expressive child, but he had a way of speaking volumes in subtle shifts. Like the way he began sitting next to me during dinner again, or the way he asked questions that hinted at a deeper understanding of the world. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, he asked me if being strong always meant doing things alone. I looked at him, surprised by the depth of the question, and answered honestly. "No," I said. "Being strong sometimes means asking for help when you need it. But when no one shows up, you find out just how strong you really are." He didn't say much after that, but the way he nodded told me he understood more than I'd realized. Mia, on the other hand, had been blossoming in ways I couldn't keep up with. Her teachers called to tell me she had taken a leadership role in class, that she'd helped a new student navigate their first week of school. "She's kind," her teacher said. "The kind that comes from watching someone else model it with grace." That made me emotional in a way I didn't expect. Because as much as I tried to teach my kids values through words, I knew it was my actions that left the deepest imprint. And if Mia had learned to be kind, empathetic, and brave, it meant I had done something right. Maybe the most important thing. One evening, we sat together on the couch, the three of us wrapped in a blanket, watching old home videos I had salvaged from my phone and stitched together with a free editing app. We laughed at Mia's toddler dance routines, Caleb's serious little face during his first science experiment, and my tired but smiling eyes behind the camera. At one point, the screen froze on a still frame of me holding both of them at a park, my hair windblown and my arms wrapped tightly around them. Caleb reached out and paused the video. "You did all of it," he said quietly. "Even when it was just you." That simple statement lodged itself in my heart like a pin holding everything together. I smiled, not wanting to cry in front of them, and said, "Yes. And I would do it all over again." Outside our little world, things were still happening. The interview continued to circulate online, especially in single-parent communities. I was invited to speak at panels, to write op-eds, to appear on podcasts. Some people praised me, others questioned my choices, especially the part about keeping Adam at a distance. But I didn't waver. I knew my story wasn't meant to be a blueprint for everyone. It was just mine, raw and real. I didn't need universal approval to validate it. The truth was, the people who mattered most, Caleb and Mia, had already spoken their truth through the way they loved, trusted, and leaned on me. I did eventually tell them about Adam's visit, weeks after it happened. We were driving home from the library when I gently brought it up, choosing my words with care. Caleb sat in silence for a long time, then finally said, "Did he want to see us?" I told him yes, but that I had explained things were going to be on our terms. Not his. Mia, ever intuitive, asked, "Did you want him to see us?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. "Not yet. I wanted you two to have the choice when the time is right. They both nodded, and I could see the relief in their eyes. Relief that I was still the one holding the compass, still guiding them through the parts of life too complicated for them to fully grasp. And I realized something in that moment. Leadership isn't loud. It's steady. It's consistent. It's knowing when to protect and when to let go. That night, after they had gone to bed, I stood in the hallway between their rooms and just listened. To their soft breathing, their small movements in sleep. I thought about how far we'd come, from nights when I wasn't sure we'd have enough to eat, to nights like this, where peace had become our new normal. Not perfection. Not luxury. But peace. And in that hallway, I whispered a silent promise to myself. I will never again question whether I am enough. There was no dramatic fanfare. No grand declaration to the world. Just a quiet, steady acceptance that the worst was behind us, and that whatever lay ahead, we'd face it together. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Because we had built something stronger than what was taken from us. Love, trust, resilience, and each other. Months passed, and with them came a quiet evolution in the rhythm of our lives. The chaos had dulled into a calm steadiness, like a river that once overflowed its banks now flowing confidently within its course. The house began to reflect this change. Not just in how it looked, but in how it felt. There was laughter echoing down the hallway, backpacks dropped by the door after school, art projects spread across the kitchen table, and weekend mornings spent making pancakes in pajamas. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And every part of it felt earned. Mia had started writing short stories. I found them tucked into her notebooks, little tales about strong girls who faced dragons or monsters disguised as people. In every story, the heroine always outsmarted the threat. Not with violence, but with kindness and sharp wit. One afternoon she handed me a folded page and said, "This one's about you, Mom." I opened it and read about a queen who built her castle from ashes after the king left. A queen who didn't need to be rescued, because she had already saved herself, and everyone else too. I didn't say much. I just pulled her into a hug and whispered, "Thank you." Because how could I ever explain how much it meant that she saw me that way? Caleb, meanwhile, had taken up soccer. He wasn't the loudest or the flashiest player, but he was steady, calculated. His coach once told me, "Your son reads the field like a grown man. He plays with heart, and he listens." That's rare. Watching him play made me think about all the times I worried I was doing this alone, that without a father figure he'd be missing something essential. But the truth was, he hadn't missed a thing. He had been loved, supported, and challenged every step of the way. And the way he carried himself, with quiet confidence and discipline, was proof of that. He didn't need Adam. He had grown roots without him. One Sunday evening, as the kids were busy with their homework, I received an unexpected email. It was from a documentary filmmaker who had come across my interview and wanted to feature our story in a short film about single parents. At first I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to reopen old wounds, especially now that life had found a gentle balance. But after thinking it over, I realized this wasn't about me anymore. It was about the hundreds, maybe thousands, of parents silently doing the hard work every day, feeling unseen, unheard. If my voice could help even one of them feel validated, it was worth it. Filming began 2 weeks later. The crew was kind and respectful, and they took care to make sure the kids felt comfortable. They filmed simple moments, us cooking dinner together, Mia reading on the porch swing, Caleb practicing in the yard, all while I talked about our journey. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I talked about the fear, the financial struggles, the guilt, the exhaustion, but also the victories. The small ones, like fixing a leaky sink on my own. The big ones, like getting promoted after launching a campaign that doubled our company's reach. I talked about how women are expected to quietly bear burdens without complaint, and how I refuse to let that narrative define me anymore. A few days after the filming wrapped, the director pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. "There's a strength in you that doesn't ask for applause, but we see it anyway. You're going to change how people think about single motherhood." I smiled politely, not sure how to respond. But that night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. I didn't see a survivor anymore. I saw a builder. A nurturer. A protector. A leader. The documentary was released online, and within a week, it went viral. People from all over the world began reaching out. Mothers, fathers, teenagers, even grandparents. They thanked me for telling the truth, for showing the messy beauty of choosing to raise a family without bitterness or shame. One woman from Kenya wrote, "You reminded me that walking away from a man who doesn't value you is not failure, it's freedom." A father from Brazil shared how he'd been raising 3 daughters alone after his wife's passing, and how watching the documentary gave him hope that he wasn't alone. And among all the messages was one from Adam. He wrote a long, surprisingly respectful email. He had seen the film. He apologized, not with excuses, but with sincerity. He admitted he had been selfish, cowardly, and blind to what really mattered. He said watching Caleb and Mia on screen made him feel something he hadn't expected. Shame, yes, but also awe. "They're amazing," he wrote. "You raised them beautifully. And I know I can't take credit for any of it. I just wanted to say, thank you for not letting them become like me." I sat with that message for a long time. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even cry. I just felt closure. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just an understanding that he finally saw the truth. That he finally understood what I had carried, and how I had turned pain into power. And that was enough for me. Later that week, the kids and I went out for ice cream. We sat under the string lights of a little shop near the park, laughing about Caleb's soccer misadventures and Mia's latest story twist. At one point, Mia leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I'm glad it's just us." Caleb added, "Yeah, we're a good team." I looked at them, both taller than they used to be, both shaped by love and resilience, and I felt something settle inside me. We were more than just survivors of someone else's abandonment. We were creators of something better. A real family. Looking back, it's almost hard to believe how far we've come. From that rainy night when I stood outside our home holding my children's hands and wondering what our future would look like, to this very moment, where our lives are filled with warmth, stability, and a kind of peace that can only come from building something on your own terms. I didn't know then how I would manage. I only knew I had to. And somehow, step by step, we did more than just survive. We grew into something whole. Raising Caleb and Mia alone taught me more than any degree or job ever could. It taught me the value of consistency, of showing up even when you're tired, of holding your children when they cry and celebrating every small victory like it's the biggest thing in the world. It showed me the power of unconditional love, the kind that doesn't wait for approval or reciprocation. The kind that doesn't give up. I used to think being a single parent meant doing the work of 2 people. But I've come to realize that's not true. It just means doing the work of one whole, determined, fiercely loving person who refuses to let life break them. I didn't try to replace their father or hide from the truth of what he did. Instead, I gave them honesty, structure, and room to grow. And in return, they gave me something priceless. Purpose. People often tell me I'm so strong, and while I appreciate the sentiment, I wish they could understand that strength didn't come naturally. It was built, day by day, through moments of doubt, through lonely nights, through balancing bills and school projects and work deadlines all at once. It was built through therapy sessions I could barely afford, and through friends who reminded me I wasn't alone even when I felt like I was. And it was built through my children. Every time they smiled, succeeded, or simply looked at me like I was their whole world. They made every hardship worth it. As for Adam, I don't hate him. Not anymore. In a strange way, I'm grateful. If he hadn't walked out, I never would have discovered how capable I truly am. I would have kept shrinking myself to fit his definition of acceptable, always apologizing for being ambitious, for being emotional, for being too much. His absence forced me to become someone I actually like. Someone my children can be proud of. And no, I didn't forgive him because he apologized. I forgave him because I chose peace over bitterness. I chose to focus on the family I had, not the one he abandoned. Our story isn't extraordinary. It's not some dramatic movie script with a perfect resolution. But it's real. It's full of the kind of quiet victories that rarely get celebrated. Paying the electricity bill on time, getting Caleb to soccer practice after a 10-hour shift, listening to Mia talk about her dreams without zoning out from exhaustion. These moments matter. They add up. They become a life. And today my life is full. Not perfect but full. I have a job I'm proud of, 2 children who inspire me daily, and a heart that is no longer broken, but rebuilt with gold in the cracks. We laugh more than we cry. We look forward more than we look back. And most importantly, we stand together, 3 hearts, 1 home, and a bond stronger than any promise someone else failed to keep. So yes. He laughed when I said I'd raise the kids alone. But now he pays to watch them call me Mom. And that, to me, is the sweetest ending I never saw coming.